I'm Ashton Addison from EventChain for Investmentpitch Media and FinTech News Network. And today on Blockchain Interviews, we have Sean Ford, the COO of Algorand. Sean, thank you so much for being on the show. It's a pleasure to see you.
Thanks, Ashton. Thanks for inviting me.
You're very welcome. I'm very excited to hear a little bit about Algorand today. If maybe you could kick it off by explaining how you would explain Algorand as a blockchain.
Sure. I think that the first thing that we'd like to start with is, why does blockchain matter overall from our perspective? And for us, there's a few things that we saw in the market. One, that there's an erosion of trust that has really sort of existed fairly systematically, especially among millennials, where 92% of people don't trust their current financial institution. We see a world where value does not flow freely, but information largely does. We see that there's over 2.2 billion people in the world who remain unbanked and don't have access to modern financial instruments. And we also see over 6% of global GDP is really tied up in transaction costs, which is trillions of dollars. So in that world, I think blockchain has a real chance to be disruptive and to help sort of right and stabilize that environment where everyone is open and able to participate in those opportunities. So Algorand in particular, something that was founded originally by Silvio Micali, who's a Turing Award winner out of MIT. And what he really saw was a number of the current implementations of blockchain didn't provide a number of the things that were required to make them more relevant for broad adoption and mainstream business use. And that's really scalability, decentralization, and security. And we think at Algorand, we've solved those three things, which really sets us apart and makes us more ready to be adopted by both end users, developers, and businesses.
That's great, Sean. Now you touched on decentralization and security. Right now, Ethereum being one of the main blockchain networks, we know scalability is an issue, but maybe you could touch on some of the problems of decentralization and security and how Algorand is providing a unique selling proposition for those two features.
Sure. Well, I think the way we would start is back to Silvio's take on how to create a foundational blockchain that really takes the best of what we know and makes it better in the blockchain space. Specifically, there are different types, as you know, of blockchain approaches. One of the most famous being proof of work, and many of the systems started there. Certainly, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all respect phenomenally disruptive and innovative technology. I think that then we saw different flavors of proof of stake, which is a little bit different in the sense that it has people who are actually in the network and participating in some way, shape, or form as powering that mechanism to drive block to block and to drive the blockchain forward from a transactive perspective. So Algorand is something that's called pure proof of stake. That's a basic sort of next generation approach to driving a consensus mechanism that essentially says with everyone who participates and has any amount of stake in the network, with one algo, which is the currency that was launched by the Algorand Foundation, you have one vote. And as a result, it is absolutely decentralized because there is not the ability to sort of concentrate or overly dominate in any particular one area driven by either your access to resources or access to energy that you'd see in more of a proof of work system. And we have everyone participating across the network on a stake-weighted basis to validate each of the blocks that we have or being a part of that. So highly decentralized. That obviously, that lack of central authority and really prevents, therefore, a lot of the centralized security issues that we might see that result from either dominating the chain or driving the chain in ways that don't really reflect either the broader good or the broader consensus of the people who are participating from it. So I think that, for those reasons and for the fact that Algorand's design was actually proven out by runtime verification independently, that it doesn't fork based on our consensus mechanism, it's really become a much more trustworthy and obviously transparent way for other institutions or participants to know that when they work with Algorand, there won't be any of the confusion that's associated with that forking and the commensurate security risks. Those are two ways that we address those two issues.
Mm-hmm. That's great, Sean. Thank you so much. And could you talk a little bit about how long it's been in development for, and at what stage is the development at right now?
Sure. So, it's interesting. We have Silvio McCallie has basically been doing this his whole life as one of the founders of modern day cryptography. The technology finally caught up to his brain, and we're able to sort of put things in place that we think are pretty interesting. So his life has really been dedicated to this. Certainly the project has been going on for a number of years. And we closed around in September, October last year of $62 million from a broad base of global investors. And so the project itself has really been going in earnest as we've scaled up since early 2018. We now have over 50 people. It's a global team. And we are, in terms of where we are, we launched our mainnet, open sourced our code about a little over a month ago, and have seen, over 1,200 nodes are already participating, helping to run the network in a very short period of time. And we've been operating at a transactions per second of over 1,000, and our block-to-block latency has been under 5 seconds, and that is for every block to date. So really, really strong performance from the tech itself since inception.
Mm-hmm. Wow, congratulations on the speed performance so far. Sounds like a great start. You mentioned that you guys raised 62 million. That sounds like a great amount to raise. Maybe you could touch a little bit on the investors and the partners so far that are involved with the project.
Sure. So we're very lucky. We have a number of investors who participated and took a chance on us. It is a global group. More than 2/3 of the investment essentially came from outside the United States. We basically took an investment model that really mirrored the philosophy of decentralization, meaning there's a broad array of individuals who contributed fairly similar amounts to the project, and they all have a participation incentive to actually be a part of the network and run the network. So we get the best of both worlds: a decentralized group of investors and something that is aligned sort of philosophically with where we're headed from a protocol perspective.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Now, in terms of having a working business model, your mainnet is live right now. I'm sure there are some developers that are working on dApps for the Algorand blockchain. How do you see the Algorand company driving business and creating a sustainable business moving forward?
Yeah. Well, I think first we start with an approach in the team that is, let's take what we think is the best technology and the best sort of developer and tech team in the world, led by Silvio and a number of other people who are luminaries in their own right. And let's combine that with, I think, a very strong business team that also knows how to predictably and reliably execute against strategic choices that we make. And as in many cases and in many companies, doesn't have to be blockchain. If you have good tech but bad execution, you fail. If you have good execution but the tech's not there, you fail. I think we've really, from a build a sustainable business, put a great group together, and I think demonstrated by hitting our milestones, launching on time, being able to execute and communicate to the market effectively. Mm-hmm. So that's one piece. I think the second piece is we genuinely wanted to avoid the problem of overpromise and underdeliver out of the gate. We looked at the environment, and very easy for projects to claim and hopefully ultimately get to great places with what their tech is going to do. But I think what we took was a very pragmatic approach to say we're going to build a very, very fast core consensus engine that is going to be very good with high velocity transactions, and we're going to be very measured about how we start to build both additional layer 1 capabilities into it and layer 2 capabilities into that protocol. So again, managing expectations around what we would deliver also creates a recipe for success and stable growth. And then lastly, look, there's a bunch of business models that we see coming into play, certainly appealing to the developer community and getting people to build. We actually just announced today, Flipside Crypto has has put 2 DApps on Algorand that allow you to do base analytics for any developer that actually builds an app on a DApp on our platform. They're going to be able to measure for free the performance and see how that's doing across the network. So, there's a bunch of effort to build those types of things, but also, working with businesses to help build continually more sophisticated financial instruments where people can come and build those instruments on top of Algorand. We're one of the only blockchains, if not the only, that has a seat at ISDA, which is the International Swaps and Derivatives Association, where essentially we are taking the well-known sort of, financial models that they've developed and working with them to translate it onto the blockchain and then give people access to that through ISDA. So there's a number of, I would say, streams of both build the team, build the right tech foundation, make sure you execute, and then start to layer on with new technology and new tools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great, Sean. Execution really is important to the success, and I'm glad that your team is focused on that. And if we could touch a little bit on that, how do you plan to execute, and what is the roadmap now that the mainnet is launched in the next 6 months to 12 months? How are you going to grow the developers in the ecosystem?
Sure. Well, there's a whole bunch of things we're doing. I mean, first we have our developer website that's up where there's a number of APIs and SDKs where we're starting to do, I think, fairly broad outreach to the community. We've done probably 50 or 60 meetups around the world and continue to engage with that group. Silvio, in fact, right now is on the road and he's doing meetings in Europe. So I feel like there's a desire to continue to both build for simplicity and engage with developers so that they can easily start to build apps on top of Algorand. That's definitely a big part of it. I think a second is really looking at the roadmap that you mentioned. We sort of break those into a couple of buckets. I think the first bucket is continuing to optimize performance. There's a couple of features we're calling Vault, which is our solution to reducing the storage footprint even further. Algorand's a very light storage product anyway, light demands, but making that even better. There's a product called Pixel, which essentially helps reduce bandwidth requirements, continues the performance. There's a bunch of things there, but there's also some things that I would say are more forward-leaning. Certainly look at what we're calling smart squared contracts. The next generation of what that would be and how we would execute against those is very high. Atomic swaps is something that we've talked a lot about, but again, Silvio likes to call that atomic squared swaps. So, you can do the math. That's how much improved it is. And there's several other things that we're looking to layer in as layer 2 capabilities that really start to differentiate one and then expand the range of opportunities that can be built. All those are actually found in a blog Silvio wrote about our forthcoming technology. It's out there. People can certainly check that out for more detail.
Wow. Sounds like you guys have a lot on the go, and that's very promising. I'm looking forward to seeing those updates. Now, one thing you just touched on a minute ago was the financial derivatives and swaps. I'm interested in learning more about other business use cases. Are you seeing financial instruments as one of the main use cases for Algorand, or where else can this apply to the business world?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there's a concept that has been out there, but that we talk a lot about, which is decentralized finance. And we think, making it easy for people to leverage the blockchain to be able to expand their markets, grow their markets, and really offer, more sophisticated financial vehicles to their users is a super valuable thing and powerful thing. One use case that we've talked about is Asset Block, which is a commercial real estate company that is effectively looking at cross-collateralizing loans, part of that loan's collateral being based on actual real estate, part of that loan's collateral being based on digital assets, really brings those two things together, forms the basis for giving loans at favorable rates for people. So that's an interesting one. There's a number of others that are out there in terms of creating additional insurance products, sort of doing what ISDA did, except with insurance vehicles. Again, developing that on top of Algorand. So a bunch of appeal in that space, in the commercial real estate space, as well as a place that we've really started to see some early traction, which is on payments and payment platforms. You see a lot of legacy payment platforms out there that are looking to make sure they're strategically relevant in the future. And I think they see a way to leverage blockchain or one that is constructed the way Algorand is to be that bridge towards a more relevant and I would say technically innovative platform for the next 20 years or whatever it might be. So a lot of good traction in those areas for us.
Great. Thank you, Sean. And how can people learn more about the project? Are you looking for more end users or more developers? And what's the best way to learn more?
That's a great question. So look, we have algorand.developer.org, and that's the developer site. We have community.algorand.org, and that is the community site. But that being said, I mean, look, our priorities are continue to add developers, continue to engage with that community. Also, really make sure that we are sort of visibly, sort of highlighting use cases and interacting with other companies, so that they get a chance to partner with us and try out the sort of core protocol, since it's open and it's sitting there for them now. So I would say it's really two prongs. It's engaging with businesses that are looking for a next generation application for what they may have in terms of their core products, and for developers to come and join us and both build and then watch the performance of that DApp on top of the Algorand platform. It's been, like I said, great growth in the first month, and we're really excited about where we're headed.
That's very exciting. I'll leave those links in the description box below. Thank you so much for your time, Sean. That's all the time we have today. Let's follow up in the near future.
Great. Thank you so much, Ashton. It was great seeing you.